Should police collect DNA to help solve crimes? You can tweet me. I'm at Lynn Smith TV or at HLN. Let's talk about this with Tom Fuentes. He's a senior law enforcement analyst and former FBI assistant director. Joseph Scott Morgan is a forensic expert and associate professor at Jacksonville State University. And Robert Bianchi is a criminal defense attorney and former New Jersey prosecutor. Gentlemen, all thank you for being with me. And I just want to get an idea. Show of hands here. Does anyone think this is a good idea? Oh, okay, Tom, okay, why do you think it's a good idea?
Well, I think the use of DNA isn't just used to solve homicide cases, as if that isn't enough good reason, but it's also used to clear up other mysteries. For instance, if you have a mass casualty event, plane crashes, or a building blows up, and you're trying to identify people that may be victims of that, and you don't have enough dental evidence, let's say, to do a dental check or a fingerprint check, a small sample of DNA may be just enough. And you've heard about some of these plane crashes where the authorities have asked family members, if you think your loved one was on that aircraft, send us a hairbrush, send us something from your home that may have that person's DNA on it, and then they can achieve some level of closure that identifies the victim of that event.
Well, and Tom makes a good point, gentlemen. I mean, I don't know, Robert, as a defense attorney, if you're going to agree, because obviously that means you're going to have a lot tougher of a case.
No, listen, I was a prosecutor for most of my career, as a homicide assistant prosecutor, as a head county prosecutor. I'm all for solving crimes with DNA evidence that's voluntarily surrendered or surrendered through a court order. But to give the government that much power to have everyone's DNA, you wouldn't give the passcodes to your phone, you wouldn't give it to your computers. While I love the police work that was done here, and it was done also in the Golden State Killer case, I think giving law enforcement all of that power and data in government is a bad idea, because even though I was in government most of my life and a prosecutor for most of my career, people do bad things with that data, and we should protect our Fourth Amendment interests, that we just don't just scuttle away the most basic thing about who makes you you, so it's not abused.
And Joseph, I'm surprised you don't agree with Tom, because you're a forensic scientist. I mean, it'd be like being a kid in the candy store, getting some of the evidence that you've been waiting for forever.
Yeah, but you want to be constitutional.
Yeah, it really would be. And keep in mind, Lynn, I worked for the coroner's office in the New Orleans area and finished up my career with the medical examiner's office in Atlanta, where I was a senior investigator, and I can't tell you how many graves of unidentified bodies I stood over. But again, it begs the question, how far do you want to push this? How far do you want to get into the private lives of the citizenry out there? Yeah, the utility is there. We can use it, but there's also other utility that we can call on upon as well, without digging in to. We're not just talking about private lives here, Lynn. We're talking about the base code of what makes us who we are. And I even sat on a panel with the surviving victims from the Golden State Killer, and my heart went out to these women. It was a fantastic story. It truly was. But at what point in time do we, do we wipe the tears away and begin to say, well, yeah, it worked in this case. We're going to sacrifice all of our privacy and just turn everything that is essentially us over to the government.
Well, and there's also the point that how much is that going to make it an open and shut case, Tom? For investigators, yes, if you have the DNA, it establishes that first connection, but then what do you need? Because it's a distant relative in some cases.
No, that's true. You still need other investigation and corroboration, but it does help narrow down the pool of people that you're looking at, or possibly eliminate a large number of others. So we're talking about individuals whose civil liberties might be infringed on, but on the other hand, if you're put on death row and DNA frees you, that's the opposite of having your rights infringed on. So there's two sides to the story.
Yeah.
And I think, like right now, if you're in the U.S. military, I know I was sent to run FBI operations in Iraq in 2003, and all of my team and I had to give DNA samples. They swabbed our cheeks, and that way, if we were over there and got blown to bits, it would only take that little bit to say, yeah, that was Tom Fuentes that was blown up there. They wouldn't need teeth. They wouldn't need fingerprints.
You know,
so
Robert,
I see both sides of this.
And, Robert, to the other side, there's another unsolved murder in Indiana. That's in Delphi, where two young girls were brutally murdered. The suspect is still out there. They have no DNA link, but they have the DNA. I mean, this is a case where parents are sitting there waiting to find out what happened to their young daughters. What would you say to them as to why this is not a good thing to do? do?
Listen, as a prosecutor, I would be using it, and if you use the judicial process or have a reason to do it because it's a cold case, that's fine. That's a different thing for me than collecting everybody's DNA, having what makes you, every innocent person, everyone, period, and having it subject to abuse. However, in a circumstance in which you have a case like that, that's a cold case, I think that is a valid use of the police going to these databases and seeing if they can run something through, because in the end, and one of your guests alluded to this before, the way you connect it is you get the DNA of the persons that are limited by the match that's made with, like, say, Ancestry.com, and then you can make an exact match. So that's a reasonable, balanced approach.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. Two sides, Tom, as you point out. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate it.